Okay, so good morning. As you know, my name is Megan, and I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to join this call so we can discuss how COVID has impacted your business in 2020. So let's get started.
Great.
The easiest question of the day is, can you share your name and your practice area?
Right. My name is Tom Chu. I'm a trust and estates attorney, and I came to law firm suites straight out of law school and passing the bar. So I went straight to solo and straight to 11 Broadway.
Oh my gosh, how long have you
Mhm.
been with us at Law Firm Suites?
Since 2013. So it's going on. It'll be 8 years, yeah, shortly. So straight on. In fact, a colleague of mine from Hofstra, Jolena Lewis, Pickett Lewis, started the same exact day. So we didn't know the other one was coming, but we actually signed on the same day.
That's
So
amazing. It
yeah,
just, Law Firm Suites is just bringing people together.
it is. It's a great story.
How would you characterize your practice before the pandemic? How were you doing?
I was, on plan in terms of, I had business, business advisors helping me figure out how to structure my work. I've gotten referrals all along throughout from my neighbors. In fact, my office mate Peter Archesi is a very experienced trust and estates attorney, and we actually share an office but don't share a practice. So we're both solos, uh, and he's actually an alumnus of the same law school I went to, but many years prior. So I sought him out as part of choosing the suites, in that I wanted to find people in my practice area as well as people who could be referral partners. So in Peter, I have both. So I have got earned fees, from referrals that come from my neighbors. So I wanted to be in that kind of environment where I would be able to earn part of my rent, which I continue to do. But especially as a new attorney in the suite, I wanted to kind of establish myself as a good neighbor and so on. But yeah, so my in terms of where my business was before COVID, it was on track in terms of my expectations of wanting to have a certain kind of performance. Um, Interestingly enough, actually I didn't really, in terms of revising my work, I was really kind of too busy to figure out how to change it. I was just basically just kind of kept on going. I mean, things were changing really fast. So now we're a year out. So basically, just almost exactly years when we had the shutdown, right?
Right.
So yeah. So basically, it was definitely a shock when it happened. But my business had to change in terms of just the way I was, you know, I already had a workflow of cases that were on their way through, but we had to then kind of retool everything. So yeah, definitely people were scared. There's so much uncertainty at that time, and there were many people obviously just weren't going anywhere, in terms of going to the office and so on. But as it turned out, actually solo um, business owners were okay to actually work alone, which is what I did. So I continued actually to go to my office on days that I could. But I'm speaking to you now from my home office, which is on 90th Street and Park Avenue, Manhattan. So I keep some stuff here, and I have a laptop which I bring back and forth. But I like unlike other people, this I don't love working from home. So some people are like, oh, don't you love working from home? I'm like, it's okay. I mean, I have a very nice environment here. Don't get me wrong. But I like going someplace that's not. This happens to be a bedroom that has a computer set up, and so it's not so cool to be to have your stuff where you are supposed to have rest, and that's supposed to be my TV, but it's also a computer monitor, and it's nice to have the option, but I really treat this space as my kind of the other office when I don't feel like going downtown, or if I don't have to see people in person, I can do the Zoom meeting as well from here as I would in the office. So as it turns out, because you're in the office, it's just as well that we're actually in different spaces. But that's an example of how kind of rejiggering wasn't horrible for me. Um, Basically, I had cases that were already in workflow, and I just told clients, look, we can finish the matter. We'll just do it online. And so the governor came up with remote notarizations, and remote witnessing. And so with the help of neighbors in the office, I was able to do what's a pretty complicated process where you have to have the original documents with the signer, and then you have to pass them back and forth. It has to be done on a video conference, and there has to be a clear line of kind of how the procedure is tracked in terms of keeping it legitimate and checking IDs and so on. But I was able to just basically roll the punches and keep right on with those cases that had been open. The challenge then came to like, how do you generate more business while you're in this lockdown situation? But basically, I had already had channels open in terms of my social media. I'm on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and I pretty much just documented what I was doing, just as a way of sharing, like, well, here's how I'm working through the pandemic, trying to inspire others, trying to encourage others, but of course maintain confidence in my clients, right? To say that, okay, things are different. There's a lot of uncertainty, but if you're going to work with me, I've got it figured out. We will work, we'll get things done. And frankly, my business actually grew in 2020. I actually had probably my best year at the Suites in 2020, partly because I was able to work truly remotely with clients. So I actually closed about 20 cases.
Oh wow.
Between March and, well, including so let's say in the last year. So not all in 2020, partly in 2021. 20 cases completely remote, meaning these clients I never met in person.
Right, because I remember when the pandemic started, you were really quick with your turnaround in terms of switching to be really remote. So, when did you realize that the pandemic was going to impact your business the way it did? So, pretty much what I'm asking is, at what point did you realize that COVID was going to be bigger than what we all actually anticipated it to
Yeah, I
be?
mean, basically, it was like, I remember March 17th was the last day they had indoor dining.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and the thing is that there were also, obviously, like, the transport was saying essential workers only. So I was, as a solo business owner, I could get out of the house and go to the office, which I continue to do, and a few people did. And the offices were open straight on. So we, mail was being delivered. We had to figure out different ways of getting things done because the mail was slowing down. I started using courier services. I actually, because of the slowness with this whole remote notarization business, I was actually starting to hand deliver documents. So I would have my father's my chauffeur. I'm really fortunate to have that. He actually would literally drive me around Manhattan and dropping things off at doormen just to save that extra time
Right.
it would take to courier. Because if you're using like UPS and pay for overnight service, you're paying for overnight, it wouldn't arrive until the second day. So I could reliably pay for second day and get there second day for a lot less money. And we're talking about a document would cost like $15 each direction, plus the person would have to go outside to drop off the return packet. So that wasn't necessarily a great idea for people who were worried about being exposed. So I had to get ahead of that kind of stuff. So I literally would drop stuff off with the doorman. Sometimes, in some cases, the staff would bring it up, the client would sign it by hand, and they would actually then bring it back down. Sometimes we did it that way, but anyways, not an easy task to pivot. But when it happened, I was figuring it out right on the spot. I was like, it's clearly not turning around because the news kept on getting worse and worse. So the issue at the beginning was that until basically June, we basically had this like essential workers only on public transportation. You had frontline, you had medical people. We had this overnight, shutdown on the subway, which has been shortened. It was definitely like first days were kind of a little scary for some people. But for me, it's like, look, I'm masking up. The office is really well run. It's clean. There's hardly anybody there. So I just continued, and I already was, somewhat mobile. I already had like all of the setup that you see now. I already had it before March. I was, in some ways, I was kind of more adept at the Zoom business, and then I even did things like, had to adapt, even the software that I was using, for instance, to record FaceTime because with the notarization, you have to have, and the witnessing, you have the witnesses and the subject and me. So 4 little quadrants on an iPhone, which you can't do in normal FaceTime. So I had to download House Party, this app, which is free, but guess what? I learned it from my clients.
Yeah.
Client said, "Oh, this is a secure app," and I got my witnesses to help me that way. And they pretty much did what they would do in the office, which is great. And so I rely on the office neighbors to help figure out those details. And if I worked in an office, there are certainly other attorneys that work sublet space in a larger firm, that kind of thing. They wouldn't have had the infrastructure that I had of friendly people who got what was needed, but also, frankly, just all the other facilities, right? That the high-speed scanner, the printer, everything was kept, up to the standard from the days before, and we just plowed right through. But there were, yeah, definitely many days where I felt like I was the only person around. It's a lot better now. There are a lot more people coming back. Not that it's crowded by any measure, but I have this week, just as an example, I had 3 sets of clients that came for document signings in person because they didn't really want to do this remote business. It's very cumbersome, it's time consuming, and they have to have a lot of equipment because they have to print out documents, they have to be able to scan or fax it back to me. And not all my clients are wise to that or have the equipment at home. So it's not always possible for them to do it. And now there's a little more confidence in coming down. So yeah, so I totally had to figure that out right on the spot and improvise somewhat. But truth is that everything that I needed, I was still able to perform, some version of what I was doing before. And frankly, in trust and estates, suddenly people who would think like, oh, I don't want to go see a lawyer, go downtown. Now I'm saying like, oh, but we can do it on Zoom or a phone call. And so that kind of excuse kind of got washed away. And then, the next thing was like people would say, oh, all my papers are at home and I'm at work. I'm like, well, now you're working from home. So now there's really no reason. There's no excuse for not getting this done. And frankly, I have clients who are motivated because people were dying. I mean, they were afraid for their lives. And, they in my business, it's not if you die, it's when you die. What do you want to have happen? So the thing is that the fact is that even if you're not generally feeling at risk, suddenly you're feeling somewhat vulnerable and thinking like, oh, I could be that person that I'm reading about in the paper who suddenly dies and they get sick from something and they die. But we could get hit by a truck. We could be have a slip and fall. We can have cancer diagnosis that can shorten our lives. All kinds of things happen to people every day, and they're not stories that I make up. They're all real life stories, right? So the idea that we're immune from these things, people have definitely felt more vulnerable, and definitely more mortal. That the death is probably, or at least disability, is a more likely possibility than it seemed in the past. And so I didn't have to do that much of a new narrative because the news was doing that for me. That people were saying to themselves like, oh, I need to get this done. So I had clients from before who had been kicking that can down the road for years. In fact, some of my signers this week are from 2 years ago and had paid me half of my fee up front and just hadn't paid the other half. And I said, well, I have your money. Why don't you go ahead and just finish it? And so this has happened. And, and even some clients even allow me to have a photo with them, which is rare. But, I have clients who become friends and friends who become clients. I'm friendly with really all of my clients at the end, because there's an intimacy in what I do, because I have to know everything about the financial position. So as I described my practice area, I'm at the corner of legal and financial. I'm a lawyer, yes. But the thing is that if you don't understand finance, personal finance, it's impossible to really be a good trust and estate attorney. So I'm able to help people deal with the stuff that's very important to them, whether it's saving for college or leaving money to their kids or funding charitable causes. I'm able to do the things that matter to them the most. And so being at the Suites has been a great nurturing environment to be around other kind of entrepreneurial, nice people. we're really a nice set of neighbors that even if they're there mainly to work on their own cases and work, there's still a colleagueship that is very different from a typical law firm because we're not in competition. We're people doing our own thing, and we do look to each other for help. I certainly love the idea that my neighbor is a notary and will take care of my documents. I don't have to wait in line at the bank. That's a great benefit right there. But I also will pick the brains of my colleagues on things, issues that may not be in my specialty, just to get a bounce an idea off of somebody or construct a referral. I had just in the last couple of days, and even though we're not at anywhere near any percent capacity, it would be, I'm not good at estimating,
Right.
but we're probably reflective of Wall Street area in general. That's a very small percentage of people are in the office. Not that people don't, in fact, my office neighbor, Peter, is not in every day, but he's, obviously he has his papers there and comes in and do what he needs to do, picks up mail. So it works everybody's doing it at the level that works for them.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I'm there more often because I have more document signings, but I'm that person who doesn't love working from home.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I like suiting up, I get dressed, I have my routine. I like to sit at my desk. I happen to have a great view of the harbor. And so I like that. And and I put my hours in. And then when I'm done, I close the door and I kind of go back and do other things. And so I think it's just a great environment. And I did shop around when I first saw the space, and I was really taken with the way that the suites were marketing themselves, and it's not just the space, but it's the environment and the colleagues, and my closest attorney colleagues are right here.
Right.
So I don't really look beyond. Not that I don't network, but the people are very available to me. I don't have to, if I have a great real estate attorney in Jonathan Jabal.
Right. That was one of the big things that the founder of Law Firm Suites had in mind when he thought of this, was creating a space where lawyers can kind of glean off of each other. And if you needed legal advice or you just needed to talk to someone who kind of understands what you're going through, they're right next door or they're right
Yeah.
down the hall. And you don't have to go to the bank for a notary because someone is right here already that can give you that service and won't charge you. So this was about creating a community where everyone is helping each other, and even down to the staff, where you're like, we take so much pride in being able to help you guys further your business in any matter. And like even this week, you mentioned that you had 3 people come in, and myself and Rafael were able to be your witnesses. And we really enjoy doing stuff like that for you guys, because it also lets us see like, oh wow, this is what they're doing. Like, like I've learned so much about trust in the states from you just sitting in our
Right.
will signings, which is
Right.
amazing. Um, my next question would be, how do you vet which of your clients are going to come into the office and which one
Mhm.
you're going to do virtually? Like, is there a way that you kind of prep them into when they come into the office?
Sure. I mean, I give my clients lots of options.
Mm-hmm.
So, I basically tell them, the environment that I'm working in, and I give them, so it's basically coming in for the document signings. Um, as far as consultations go, I do home delivery. So I will come to their home. I also belong to the Yale Club in Midtown by Grand Central. So I host meetings there, and they've been open for a while now. So I'm able to have a Midtown kind of place where I can host a meeting and have some confidential space where people feel the sense of privacy. But I always offer the office because we have it. It's a great location. Basically, almost every subway line converges somewhere within one stop of us, even. Yeah, I mean, basically West Side, East Side, you can get to our offices at 11 Broadway, which is great. So in terms of vetting people, I basically just tell people, it's just casual that I give them an option. So I would say, look, if you want to do the document signing in person, you go home with the documents the same day.
Mm-hmm.
And we can get you out of there. And in fact, we did something yesterday, um, and they were really prepared. I think we were pretty much done in half an hour. It was a couple with a trust, and it's great to have this. I mean, for me to have you guys, you and Raphael, it's invaluable because wouldn't have the means to even ask anybody. If I were in a different setting, I wouldn't necessarily feel like the comfort to be able to just ask for that favor. But it's also, the thing is that you're part of what they're getting when they come. They have the experience of professional people. Everybody loves it to a person. They're like, they see the sign with all the names of the attorneys on the outside, and they see my plaque, and they see like I'm in the company of like all these names, and they just brushing by. They just see like I'm known in the office. The staff, it is that kind of sense of propriety that people expect in a law office. So it's not like a WeWork, and we're compared to that. It's like, oh, this is like a lawyer's WeWork. Well, it's actually just really like a law office that happens to be a co-working environment. But it really is kind of set up in a way with even the decor, just the sense of propriety, and just uh, decorum, right? Of just being quiet and studious and confidential. Because I think that's the biggest thing that people worry about, right? Is that, are people snooping on our conversations, or do we have privacy when we speak? So, and that even like, will the staff hold confidences, that kind of thing? Because we're dealing with very sensitive information, right? So that's a big part of, when I chose the space, kind of, I'm tuning into a culture that's already very established. And so it's the kind of all the best part of being a part of a big law firm with none of the stress, because there's no partner meetings, there's no budgets, there's no billable hours, that I have to achieve. So I have my own goals, and I'm a solo, and part of having the environment there is that actually my overhead is less than it would be in another place. So I can keep more of the money I make, but also I'm able to also charge less than some other attorneys, which I'm comfortable doing. I mean, I do basically effectively like sliding scale. My wealthier clients definitely pay more, but I serve many clients that are, and I know, in my business, I know what my clients have because they have to disclose it to me. So I do bring in clients that are not of great means. They can afford to pay something, but they don't pay the full freight. And so I have the flexibility of doing that. That basically, if I had to spend a lot more money on rent in another space, because basically, when you have to work out as a solo, like, what does it really cost to be someplace? It's expensive. If you're subletting, like doing a sublet from another, kind of over tenant, it may not include the kind of stuff that we just know, like conference space, like is part of the agreement that I have at the suite. So I know I'm paying one fee and includes certain services, and then you just pay as you go for a scan or whatever. And it's actually way cheaper than running my own machine, because I know I just pay as I go, and it's always highly, well maintained, well stocked. I never have to worry about paper or toner or whatever being in the printer. And those things, just knowing it's right there is a huge benefit for me, because it just takes that's not lawyering. That's the administrative aspect of being an attorney, which we all have offices. So we have to have a place to store our stuff, and even that is a big deal, right? So like when you're subletting in like just a plain old office, they may not give you a closet space to stash your supplies or documents that don't fit in your office.
Now, many lawyers had to make changes to their marketing strategy. For example, like traditional networking basically went out
Right.
of the window with social distancing and things being so restricted. How have you changed your marketing strategy?
Well, I've really, right from the beginning, when I moved into the suites, I joined Business Network International, BNI. Many of the attorneys belong to chapters. So when I first joined, my neighbors were all pulling at me, saying like, "Come to my chapter. We don't have a trust in estates person." So that was a very easy thing to get involved in. It's been a cornerstone of my practice. Um, so I have to credit actually being part of the suites to even get involved in that way, because coming in as a visitor when you're sponsored by another attorney means a lot. There's somebody who's a neighbor, they know your background, you're somewhat a known quantity, we're already friendly, we already have coffee, or this kind of thing. So that's a weekly network meeting. It's part of a global network. There's 50 plus chapters in Manhattan. So that goes back to 2014 when I first joined BNI. So I've been involved in that now, so it's going on 7 years.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So,
just about.
so
So
pretty
there,
much your marketing
mm,
stems from like
word of mouth.
referrals
Yeah,
and
word of
things
mouth
like that.
referrals.
Hmm.
So that's a big cornerstone. So that's where you're really investing every week with a group of people. And the way those networks are set up is different from the suites, which is all lawyers. Those are all different professionals, and each legal area is only allowed one slot. So you might have a someone like me, but there's a business attorney, a matrimonial attorney, uh, intellectual property attorney. And the nice thing is that the suite is so diverse that we could draw on. So I have invited people from the suite to come see me at my chapter, but I'm actually wanting to build it out with more members. But there have been weeks. This is prior to COVID, but it continued into that season. So to answer your question, I've always done word of mouth marketing, but very strategically, right?
Hmm.
Not just tapping into my personal networks or just social media. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook. Um, I've gotten little leads here and there through the Law Firm Suites community online on the Facebook page. That's been helpful. Um, but most importantly, I've really been very kind of putting in a deposit every week by investing in relationships with people from other industries. I
Right.
do get referrals from other attorneys, and those other attorneys are not in the suite, and it's
Hmm.
actually a nice thing for me. So I got so involved with BNI, I became actually president of a chapter.
Oh,
I
wow.
was served for 2 years as president of BNI Chapter 31, which folded actually a year ago today, this month, a year ago, just as the pandemic was beginning.
Hmm. Um, a lot of the attorneys that I've spoken with kind of use their downtime during COVID to optimize their practices in different ways, whether it was like learning a new skill set or getting stronger in some of the things that they were already doing, or even like automating their files and like getting
Mm-hmm.
things digitized and like in the cloud.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, what are some ways that you used your downtime to
Mm-hmm.
optimize your business?
Sure. I mean, I was already using Clio, which is one of these cloud-based software packages to keep track of time. I was able to definitely use time, in between to digitize documents that and optimize them so that they could be filled out on PDF, using Adobe Acrobat. I do electronic signing now for agreements, not for the actual legal documents, but for client agreements. I do online bill pay, Zelle bank to bank transfers, things that I hadn't really. I was using LawPay, which is a credit card service, but I was paying like 3% commissions. But now people, pretty much every bank is part of the Zelle
Hmm.
system, so they have different brand names for each bank. But I can now send a bill by email, and there's no fee involved, and it clears pretty much instantaneously if they're already registered on the service. So yeah, I definitely have taken the opportunity to optimize details about my running my office, and so that's been really it's been just using the time uh, efficiently. And part of finding the time is that some days I don't commute to the office, so I'm taking out the commute time,
Hmm.
so I can just be getting to work at 9, but I still need the office. There are definitely people who have given thought to, like, well, do I really need to have a physical presence? um, my answer for myself is that I'm evaluated in part by the address that's on my business card.
Hmm.
Um, I wouldn't even fathom the idea of moving because I've been at the same address as I started my practice.
Right.
So, now I guess some people would go virtual, meaning like, have a mailbox, and that's a possibility too. But in my business, I have to do document signings in person.
Hmm.
I do a lot of consultations in person because people they don't really want to have that kind of conversation the way we're having it
Right.
about their personal finances, about the people they love the most. protecting themselves, their assets, all of that stuff.
Hmm.
So they really need a place that kind of holds the conversation in confidence. So for me, it's like it's always going to be whatever like going back the new normal is. I don't think it's going to be remote only. People are going to tire of that. Um, Likewise, I think it's always going to be somewhat hybrid. I don't think it's going to go back to the old way, because once people have figured out, oh, I don't have to commute to go see my attorney.
Right.
Frankly, I tell people, like, you don't have to dress up for me either. If you're in street clothes, or frankly, but house clothes, I don't care. We can have the conversation. If you're comfortable that way, it's fine. And some clients even want to do it on the phone instead of on video, because they don't want to necessarily have to kind of tarn up their visual
Right.
presence. So that's for some older school people, old-fashioned people, they're fine with the phone. But we're dealing with very sensitive stuff.
Now, we've heard how the pandemic has positively impacted your practice. Has the pandemic impacted your personal life or any other areas of who you are and what you do in a positive way?
I guess it's changed my view of how I spend my time.
Hmm.
I mean, I spend a lot of time in my networking life over coffee, dinners out, lunches out, you know, breakfast meetings. That's all out the window. But you know what? So I saved a ton of money. I've lost a lot of weight, frankly. Um, and I'm not, because I'm really dieting. I'm just not eating out,
Right.
um, hardly at all.
Yeah, because you're our resident foodie in the
Right.
office. So,
I love to cook and I love to share my baked goods. It's fun. And even, I mean, in fact, I had a client who came this week. Came. I thought to bring you some, bake some bread.
oh,
So
wow.
I'll have to share some with you and Raphael. But in fact, I'm going to share with
Definitely.
Jonathan Jabal, our neighbor, is a big baker.
That's
So
something we definitely miss in the office is all of
is
the good
more of the
treats
goodies.
that people would bring in. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot less of that now. But so things that so no, so one of the impacts is that I've really reevaluated the way I spend my time, right?
Hmm.
So if I were having a luncheon in Midtown, I'd leave the office. I'm suited up, but I'm leaving at 11:15 to get there on time for a noon luncheon, and lunch is running 12 to, like, say, 1:15, 1:30. I get back, it's like 2 o'clock, after 2 o'clock. So that would be like a normal thing, but a lot of the way I build my business is the relationships, right? You have to invest
Right.
time. So now I'm going to do a 1 hour Zoom on a schedule. People are on time, and it's not necessarily at lunchtime. It could be before work starts. It could be from 8 to 9. I do a lot of my Zoom contacts are just kind of when people have time in between their clients, and we set up a time, and it may not seem like so obvious, but you know what? There's less friction, because they can say yes to the meeting, and they can just sit, and you have a set time, and when the hour is over, they just are ready for their next meeting. Um, I don't, again, it's like, I don't love working from home. I also don't love Zoom.
Hmm.
I find, kind of neurologically speaking, the whole thing of tracking one-to-one is one thing.
Right.
When it's like group meetings, it is exhausting to me to be like, my business network is 90 minutes with breakouts, and I'm just like, and it runs from 7 to 8:30. I'm just a wreck after that, because of just the way the brain has to process all those faces and the tiles and all this stuff. And and plus you're kind of performing for the camera, even when you're
Hmm.
not on the spot, and you're having to do that too, to stay attentive and interested in the speaker. But when you're doing that and then we're just one-on-one, when you're doing that with 25 people on the screen and they're floating around, it's not fun. It's work, and
Yeah.
it's exhausting. If I had to do it all day, I don't know what I'd have. I'd be dying. But I think some of the benefits are that I would say COVID has been an accelerant, not necessarily all in good ways, right? So you really said for the positive stuff. I mean, it certainly accelerated, people dying. It also accelerated, some of the inequalities that we're seeing in the world. But to focus on our practices, what it did accelerate is it kind of like cleaned off the slate of what's really important. So I wouldn't, when things go back, I'm going to be thinking about, is that a really great use of my time
Hmm.
to a coffee when it's not right in the financial district, or even when it's in the financial. If it's not right here, it could take a lot of time. And if I could be effective in a different way, I might want to save the time and spend it on other stuff. I've also just gotten used to being alone,
Hmm.
which is, I mean, you can tell I love being with people, um, but it has kind of opened up a whole new kind of perspective of being my own best company, um, which, it's, I don't necessarily love it, but I've, been forced to like reflect on that and be more attentive. And I also have to motivate myself working alone, right? So part of the reason I went into the suites was the colleagueship of the, even though you're working separately, next to each other, there's a motivational aspect of like, oh wow, like my neighbor's like really intent doing this stuff. It's like
Right.
I need to get like that too. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Speaking to motivation, what are one or two things that motivated you to push forward during the pandemic?
Oh wow. I mean, I think it's just, I mean, just plain old, like you gotta pay your bills. So, you know, but yeah, I mean, definitely that. But in my social media, I mean, I really tried to address these issues, right? And number one, to really be vulnerable, to say like, look, we're all suffering, we're all affected by the stuff that's going on. So I'm not alone, and I'm not a super person either. I have my own worries. But in that, was able to kind of tell a story to reach out to people to say, look, it's not too late, but it's not too soon either,
Hmm.
to get your stuff done. So let's I can help you. And there's no shame in starting it now. But death and disability are pretty much certainties in life
Yeah.
that it's going to happen. You still don't know when it's going to happen. And then and then finally, I think that just in terms of motivation, just realizing like, look, nobody's going to do your work for you. You've got to get up and figure out what you want to do, and move forward. But I've found many opportunities, even in dark days. So I'm networking with people. I have new colleagues that I've discovered in the last few days, just by being attentive to social media.
Hmm.
That's my channel now, because I can't get out. There's no other way to get out there. So the mixers are not there. But frankly, a lot of them weren't that great anyway. I didn't love being caught with the food in my hand, or so I would eat before. Even though it was like great food at this thing, I would have a glass of water that I wouldn't stain any clothes if I spilled it.
Right.
I
Right.
wouldn't want to have greasy food in my hand, and you're passing around business cards. But at the end of these mixers, if the floor is filled with business cards, people dropping stuff or tossing stuff or whatever, and it's like throwing stuff into the air or at the wall or whatever. So being more purposeful and strategic in social media to say like, I'm looking for to help people, and it's not necessarily just to plug my practice, by the way. It's I want to help a client by finding like the best personal organizer to help them do what they need to get done. But by the way, that person could actually refer me a business. So that's in fact something I'm working on right now, is to get a organizer into my business network chapter, because I think she's going to be a great referral partner for me. But
Hmm.
yeah, so stay motivated is, don't stay in your shell. Get out there any way you can, which includes um, you know online meeting online. But my business network is really a very traditional thing happening to be online, and I don't see it in. I don't think the back to normal is going to be anything less than a hybrid. It may even just stay virtual, because
Hmm.
we're going to save so much money. It costs a
Right.
thousand dollars a year to have breakfast. twenty
So
five dollars a week.
I know you've mentioned that you use social media in order to stay connected and
Mhm.
to reach out to more people. What are other ways that you've stayed in touch with or leaned on your attorney colleagues during the pandemic?
Sure. I mean, we've been covered for each other to take care of business, and I'm probably closer to the few attorneys that are in person
Hmm.
in the office, just because there are fewer of us,
Right.
than when we had more people every day. But even my closest office colleague, we have regular check-ins with each other, and probably spend as much time, quality time, because it's one to one, and we're not there each doing our own matters, right? We make an appointment, to check in, and we have each other's undivided attention. Um, and I think we're probably more effective now
Yeah.
than what was more kind of chit chat while each of us were working on our own matters, right? Even though we were in the same office.
Mhm.
Um, but we've become quite close over years. So I've been really blessed by that, and that's really a special thing. But there are a number of dyads, right? There are other attorneys who teamed up to share a space, not necessarily partners, because my office mate is not a partner. We're both solos,
Right.
but share space to save money, but also have that colleagueship.
Mhm.
So we happen to be right next door to two attorneys, a criminal attorney and a matrimonial attorney, very different practice areas. There's a kinship. It's not necessarily. I'm not going to say like we're all chummy chummy. It's a respect for each other. Certainly a fondness for a certain level of friendship. But you definitely have access to people.
Right.
So we'll drop in on each other, or just in the hall, heading to and from the elevator. We'll quiz each other on little ideas, and not least of all, like referrals, right?
Right.
Do you know somebody who does this? And to be able to just help each other like that, super super helpful. And so I think the culture, the suite definitely encourages that kind of interaction, even though it's not very organized.
Mhm.
Obviously back in the day we used to have more organized things for like all the tenants at the suites to mix. I miss that. It's not, we're not able to do that for now, but even so, those you're putting kind of little deposits into the goodwill jar, so
Right.
you can cash those out over time. But yeah, I think there's less of that now, and I think it's circumstantial. I think that things will improve, and I think that there's another generation of attorneys that are being displaced,
Mhm.
meaning they're leaving big firms, or they're deciding they don't want to be in those kind of environments, or aren't loving working from home. That
Right.
will find this a nice environment.
Now, of course, it's everyone's personal choice. But what advice would you give to an attorney who is nervous about coming back into the office on a regular basis? What would you tell them based on your experience how they should handle coming returning?
I mean, I've been there right through, so
Hmm.
I've never had any issues. It's very well run. It's clean, great ventilation. I have a window that opens. Not every office has that, but I don't even open my window, by the way. It's just that it happens to be a building where it's not. It's a rare thing, by the way,
Hmm.
in Lower Manhattan. Many buildings have windows that are sealed. So the fact that you can open if you wanted air circulation more than what you're getting in the ventilator, you can have it. But I don't see any part of what we have that's not up to total the normal standard, you know. So there's, if people are worried about kind of the appearance, we present with all the lucite, barriers, and all the kind of suggested precautions. They're all there. Um, I think that now that we realize that fomite transmission is not really the issue, it's really air circulation. The air quality of the building is fine, and but I think in general, because everybody's really so conscientious, it's probably cleaner and better run than people working from home
Hmm.
who don't have commercial ventilation. So the difference is that when you're working from home, you don't have anybody you're sharing, the space with. But I don't have any concerns about whether it's the lobby check-in, the elevator situation, the hallways coming into the suite. It's completely up to snuff of anywhere you want to go. There's no reason for people to be concerned, and I think that we don't even have the number of people who are there to really merit being so concerned. You have to see it for yourself and decide that. It's a very
Right.
subjective thing. But I've had not a single client say, I'm not coming. I give them the choice. If you come, you go home with your documents, and they all say yes. And I had 3 sets of clients in, this week, and that's as many as I had, to offer them, but every single one came. So it's not, I mean, I consider myself pretty busy. So I'm very pleased with the choices that I've made, and certainly, for a solo, you and Raphael, and just the neighbors, it's part of presenting what my clients are paying for. They like, I don't give them a big tour, they just pass through, but they see what's there, and it's very nicely run.
Now, being that we're, just about 3 months into the new year, it's 2021, right? What are some of your goals and aspirations for this year? Like, you had a great year last year, you closed 20 cases. What is 2021 looking like for Tom Chu?
And by the way, so the 20 kids, some of them were finished out. They started last year, they finished this year. But those 20 were all virtual.
Mm-hmm.
So I had some that are traditional in person. So and so some of the, in fact, a couple of those that came this week were very traditional, because they're kind of in some ways back to normal.
Right.
So in terms of my actual business goals, year on year, I'm on track to improve my income by about 25%. Part of it is also by reducing my overhead. So, and which I've done, and that's been a big help. But overall, I'm going to have 25% more, in terms of my profit and loss, my actual balance sheet. I'm expecting to have more net income, and it's partly by reducing overhead. It's also increasing the throughput, and some of this optimizing some of those processes I was talking about, where it's spending less time to do stuff for me, because I'm a solo. I don't have a paralegal. So the other big goal I have is really to build a business practice, so I can bring somebody in. That's a big step, which I do actually employ a business coach, and that's something I'm considering. You have to spend more to get more.
Right.
And I'm in the kind of pilot mode of trying to figure out how much I want to lay out for that. It's a speculative thing. You're then fending for two people, but I'm looking for a situation where, because of the employment kind of environment right now, there are people who are probably willing to work on a pay-as-you-go basis. That it's a new position for me, and if I can make more money, I will definitely compensate the person helping me. And I may make that a challenge, because the thing is, I can't really control. I don't really know what my flow is. I never do. I've just kept track of what's come in, but I can trace back to a person where my business comes from. So I have very few cases that come to me completely cold. They're really, pretty much everybody comes to me through somebody they know, they like, they trust. Sometimes all three would be great, but not sometimes, not even that, right? Sometimes they just trust them, and they may not like them that well. But as long as they trust that person, then they go to trust me. What I like to do is, by the end, I want them to be able to say, I know and like him too.
Yeah.
That I've earned that, I'm likable, and I've earned this idea that they can say I know him, and because they're the ones who mainly, when I look at the category, it's really my former clients, and I have colleagues who are my clients. So then and it's even nicer when, like, I have attorneys who in fact, one of my clients this week is a non-practicing attorney, and when he says use my lawyer, first of all, people listen to him because they know his background, and for a lawyer to have a lawyer is a big deal.
Yeah.
So that's what I aspire to, as in part. And then I have other channels like financial advisors and others. So in terms of the actual goals, yeah, that's my 25%. I think year on year, I had a pretty decent year. 2020 was actually pretty good. But again, part of that was also reducing my expenses.
Mm-hmm.
So I did not.
What's interesting is that you reduced your expenses, but you also were able to upgrade. Like, even with your office, you're able
Yeah.
to upgrade your workstation, and now you have a nice view, you have more space,
Yeah.
and it's better functionality for you.
It's quite honestly, and my office mate and I were sharing a space much larger, and we had the opportunity to change over, and so we took advantage of that. And the crazy thing is that his own daughter who had seen all his offices before. I said, Daddy, you have actually a better office now. It's cozier, smaller. It was one about size. And where I was before, I was sharing a larger space, but I was facing a wall. And now I have a space that's right by a window facing Upper Bay and Hudson River of New York. It's a beautiful environment. I can see the Statue of Liberty out my window. And I have now the lights are, the sun's setting later in the day. I have a beautiful view and natural light, which is immeasurably valuable to me just for my own well-being. And I'm actually spending less money to have it. So I got an upgrade, I'm spending less money, but these are all things that other people can have. It's definitely possible. People can come from another environment, which may not be as comfortable, and find some place in the suites that meets their needs. And quite honestly, my biggest lifestyle change, when you asked me, I really had to, I thank you for asking me, because I'll tell you this, I've spent so much less money on going out to lunch and dinner, coffee, even coffee's not free, right? It's the time. But that combined, like when I looked at what my marketing expense went to, it's a fraction of what I used to spend. So, and now I have actually more bandwidth to serve my clients, because obviously I couldn't do a client consult when I was marketing my business. Right. But it's really important for all of us to really be out there spending some part of our day telling people who can help us how to tell the story of what we do. Because people are not walking in the door. Right. They're not going to walk in the door. Just say like, oh, show me a trust and safety attorney. They're asking somebody they trust, like, do you know somebody who's really good?
Exactly. So you can't even get in the building without an appointment. So
that's right. Exactly.
Oh, so lastly, can you share something that's interesting or funny, like a little anecdote that might have happened to you in 2020?
Related to being in the suites? Or
related to being in the suites, anything in general is.
Oh, just like great coincidences. Literally, this literally happened to me in the last few weeks. And this is through networking to build my practice. I have a client who has become a friend. So my clients become friends and my friends become clients. Not universally, but it just can happen. Okay. So here's somebody who's been a business network person in my kind of referral partner world. It's become like a really nice friend, and just partly because of the pandemic, there's just you don't have that many opportunities to have that much contact. But this is somebody I've spent a lot of time with, and we're just having casual conversation. He was describing a former therapist of his. And this is somebody actually you actually did a signing for. And it's so he's describing somebody like, oh, I'm going to have lunch with my ex-therapist of 20 years ago. And he's from Far Rockaway. And his partner is a retired firefighter. And I'm like putting it together. You wouldn't believe it, that it was actually somebody who was a former client of mine, who came and did their plan with me. And I think you were one of the witnesses. So I said, his last name is Macquarie. And he's like, how did you know that? I'm like, strange coincidence, just a funny story. But the thing is that I got that client through my business network, and it was actually multiply distant, meaning I got my best friend from high school's in my network now, web developer who did my website, needed a Connecticut attorney to do trust and estate work, because I'm not licensed there. Do wills and trusts for her sister and her husband. So I went and looked at my network, extended network, to find this attorney. She got offered to do it, did a great job. Well, in return, she sent me her New York clients who she couldn't draft for, and this male couple were some of those people, and they were thrilled because I'm openly gay and understand their life situation, and they didn't have to explain anything to me. I was like, I totally get you. It's great. And that's part of my marketing, right? Is that people know my background, they know where I went to school, or they know that I have a religious affiliation. These little chit chat, connections are meaningful to certain people, especially like in terms of same gender loving couples, right? That they're comfortable from the get go because they know where I come from. And so that's a funny story, because how unlikely is it in New York that somebody would just blurt out a little, kind of fact to say, oh, I'm going to have a conversation with this person, and they don't tell you their actual name, and they start describing them. I'm like, how many gay therapists are there in Far Rockaway?
Right.
So that's a funny story, but it's also just a little story about how small the world is, and really, it warms the heart in a way, because uh, it just shows that there are these connections and that we can tap into them to grow our business.
Yeah, I could relate to that story because so many people come through our doors, especially like in the past, and they might see an attorney walk by and they're like, "Hey, is that so and so?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's, whoever it is." They'll say, "Yes, Tom Chu." And they're like, "I think I went to high school, or we were in the same class in law school." And I'm like, "Oh, really? Do you want me to go get them?" And then it's like seeing, like history, like repeat, or like people having
Sweet.
like these moments. And at the reception desk, it's so nice. That's like one of my favorite things, to see people connecting and they didn't even think they were going to come in and
Yeah.
see a blast from the past or something like that.
Yeah. That's
So
great.
it's
That's
really
great.
heartwarming. But those are all the questions I have for you today, Tom. And I just want to say it was such a pleasure talking to you. This was so much fun. And I really thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit down and talk to me.
Happy to share, and I just would love to see more neighbors at the suites. And you guys are doing a great job. I really admire what you're doing. I think it's so important to tell these stories, because in the
Mm-hmm.
end, you know, real estate is fungible. There's lots of rooms in our neighborhood that are available, but that's not mainly what it is that I came for. I could have gotten probably paid a different price if I were looking strictly at square footage or the view or whatever. But what I really invested in was really an environment, and it's been very profitable for me, and frankly nurturing. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I my closest attorney colleague happens to be my office mate,
Yeah.
and we're not only colleagues, we're also friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so for that to have happened, honestly, the chances of it happening would be pretty much 1 in a million for me if it hadn't been for and it was partly because I was able to do the research of who the tenants were in the suite,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't know me from anybody, but I approached him, and we happened to have the same law school alma mater, and there's a kinship there. We don't really tap into it that much, other than the fact that we have long line connections, but that was just the groundwork for everything
Yeah.
else. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks again. So I'll definitely be in touch, and I'll see you sometime this week,
Oh,
hopefully.
absolutely. Probably even later
Always.
day with some bread. Okay. Take good care. Thanks again.